morning. Hey, good morning. It is so good to see all of you this morning. Thank you so much for making LifePoint a part of your weekend. Thanks for joining us online as well. Hey, I do want to just double down on what Pastor Doug just said. Folks, we had probably 80 plus volunteers in the last 2 days to serve our community. Can we please say thank you to everyone who did that? We celebrate when people serve because here's the reality. We cannot be the church that God has called us to be without actually saying it's going to involve every single one of us. That He has gifted, uniquely gifted every single one of us to be a part of it. And I am so thankful when you actually serve up and do that. You all do it all the time. So thank you very, very much. But I am excited about this weekend. We're closing out a series we've been in called Flipping the Script, where it's been all about kind of helping us change the way we think, right? Where my prayer for the last few weeks is that it's been impactful for you at some level. But here's what I want to talk about today, okay? I want to talk about being in the middle, right? Where here's the reality, I think for a lot of us, is that, you know what, starting something out can be fun. When you've got the hindsight 2020 looking back, it can be good, right? But sometimes when you're in the middle, it gets a little bit awkward, right? Like it's not always the most amazing thing. Like if you're like the middle child, anybody in here a middle child? It's not always the most amazing. You know, maybe playing monkey in the middle. Maybe when you're on an airplane and you got to be in the middle seat and you're fighting for whose armrest is it really, right? Like it's not always all that awesome. Here's the thing though, I fly a lot, but I am not really a fan of flying. Anybody else here a fan? Anybody else scared of flying at all? Yeah, you're in the middle of an airplane 30,000 feet in the air. Like you don't have any control. You're just out there, right? You know, and then some of their terminology just doesn't really help the situation, if I'm being honest. Like what do they call the place where they park all the planes? The terminal, yes. For real, right? I've seen them sell life insurance in airports. I've never seen that like in a mall, right? But they sell it in the airport. And then kind of the spiel, y'all know the spiel they go through. You know what I'm talking about? Like, hey, in the event of a water landing, I'm like, what? Why are you bringing that up? No pontoons are coming out. No. What? Your seat is going to turn into a flotation device. Listen, if I'm traveling to the ground at 600 miles per hour, I've ruined that seat. For real. Like, I don't know if I want to put that against my chest. Like, nah, I'm good on that, right? No, thank you. Or, you know how they say, in case of a pressure, we lose pressure. So, like, an oxygen mask is going to, come on, you have to say that? And then in the event of that, though, just give it a little tug and air. No, I don't know what the difference, at that moment, I don't know what the difference between a tug and a yank, right? I'm just sucking air out of the ceiling. I don't care. Forget the kids. It doesn't matter to me. Right, here's the thing, like I like it when I start on the ground and I like it when I end on the ground, but I'm not always in love really with that middle situation where being in the middle it's not always all that much fun, especially when we're talking about something real, right? Like when you're in the middle of a crisis, or you're in the middle of difficulties with your spouse, or you're in the middle of difficulties with your child or whatever, and there's resentment or there's bitterness that's coming in, you're in the middle of all this stuff. It isn't always the greatest. And so here's what I want to do. I want to look today at really how can we guard against the middle, right? How can we guard the way we think when we're in the middle? Look at what it says in James chapter 1, verse 12. It says, "Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him." And so here's what we're going to do. Today we're going to jump into a story, and I'm just going to warn you up front. It's going to be a little while, okay? I'm going to be in this story for a little while, so bear with me. Don't get on your phones. Don't start scrolling Instagram or whatever, right? Just bear with, because there is a point in all of this. But it's a story that many of you have probably heard, all right? Where it's a story of a family who's kind of in the middle of this huge crisis 1,000 years before Jesus, where it's the story of Ruth. Anybody read through Ruth before? Anybody read through that? Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I just got to let you know. I've actually only spoken on Ruth one time before in my whole career. So hopefully this goes well. I don't know. But I've only done it. And here's kind of why. Is because the story kind of reads, if you've ever read the story, it kind of reads a little bit more like a Hallmark made-for-TV love story, okay? And if you've read it, you kind of know what I mean. Like it is still Holy Scripture, all right? I'm not belittling that at all. But that's how it kind of reads, where it's almost like it was written by Danielle Steele or Nicholas Sparks or whatever, where at the end of it, every dude feels like they need to be Hugh Grant. You know what I'm talking about? Right? And it's just against my religion to make anyone feel like they need to be Hugh Grant. So here's the deal. Like we're gonna jump into this story, right? But here's where the story starts. It starts in a place called Bethlehem. And a lot of you have heard of Bethlehem before, right? Where maybe you've seen it on a Christmas card, where, those cards, they make it look all quaint and pretty, but this isn't Leavenworth, all right? That's not how this works. It's not that. You know what it was? See, here's what I was, Bethlehem was more of a little rural hick town kind of a place. Think people who don't have indoor plumbing, but do have a satellite dish. You know what I'm talking about? Just that kind of a thing where people who think pro wrestling is real or NASCAR is a sport. It's kind of that type of town, right? Well, here's what's happening. Bethlehem isn't doing well, all right? Bethlehem is not doing well. In fact, what they're doing is they're going through a famine, and the reason why is because God has kind of pulled his hand of blessing away from them because of their disobedience. And so they're going through all of these trials and tribulations, but instead of the Israelites repenting and changing their ways, they decide to kind of have an exodus. And they just leave and they start going to other places. And so this particular family starts to do that as well. And so if you want, pull that outline out of your program. If you're online, well, there's an outline there if you want to follow along. What I did was I put the names of the most important characters in there because it can be a little bit confusing, okay? Because in the beginning, here's what's told to us, that there's a father and mother, right? There's Elimelech and Naomi, and they have two sons named Mahlon and Chilion, okay? Kind of sounds like the first two Jewish rappers ever, because it sounds like Tupac and P. Diddy. That's what it sounds like, right? Or Marshmello and Wiz Khalifa or whatever, right? But this is who we have. This is the family. And Naomi and Elimelech, they decide to move to a place called Moab. Here's the deal with Moab, right? And I know this is getting really involved and you're like, what is happening? Here's the thing. Moab was a horrific place. It was a place that was known for all types of terrible things. And here's partially the reason why. The way they started was horrible. So there's a guy in the Old Testament. His name is Lot, all right? Again, I'm throwing a lot of names at you. But Lot gets drunk, sleeps with his daughter, and gets her pregnant. Folks, this is in script. I can't make this stuff up. It's way more like Jerry Springer than Holy Scripture. Like it sounds like it, right? But what happens is they have this baby, and they name this little bundle of joy Moab, okay? And so that is where this town gets their name. Well, Moab is known, again, for horrific things. It's known for worshiping multiple gods. It's known for sexual perversion. It's known for all types of child sacrifices. This is the type of town that they're going to, but they have to go to it because they're desperate. And so what happens when they get to Moab, tragedy strikes, and Elimelech dies. The father dies, ends up dying. And so the boys, they take wives for themselves, right? They go and they take Moabite wives for themselves, which wasn't really the wisest thing to do. And here's the reason why. Because again, everything is different, right? Everything is different. They worship different gods. They do different things. They have different cultures. They have different political views, which I know wouldn't have a problem today for sure. But they have all types of differences in their life. But the boys, they say, you know what? I've fallen in love. I'm going to take them as my wives. And so again, in your notes, they're written there. The wives are named Orpah, right? And we don't really know that much about her other than she had a talk show host. And then also you have Ruth, right? Who's the name of this entire book. Here's what happens though. 10 years after they get married, 10 years after, tragedy strikes again, and the boys die. And some of you are looking at me like, Rusty, why are you telling us this story, right? There is a point, I promise you. But what happens is the boys die, And to make matters worse, though, the boys didn't have anything. Like, they didn't have any land, they didn't have any money, they didn't have anything. And so right now, here's what you've got. You've got 3 widows who are desperate and destitute in their poverty. And with our 21st century mind, sometimes that can be difficult to understand. Because sometimes we look at that, and of course, our hearts go out to them, right? Our hearts say, you know what, that is so tough, that is so hard, I get it. But here's the thing, what you probably need to do is go and get a job. I have less empathy in me, which hurts in the profession that I chose. But here's the deal, like that's literally how we can think at times. But the truth is that they couldn't. If you know biblical history, you know that they couldn't. Because why? Because family was how people were measured. Their value was based on their family. And so they didn't have any children. They didn't have, there was nothing there. And so they couldn't just go get a job. And so out of their desperation, here's what happens. Naomi decides to go back to Bethlehem. But she also understands that there is nothing there for the girls. There's nothing there for them. Like, she doesn't have any money, she doesn't have any land, she doesn't have anything, she doesn't have any children, nothing, right? So nothing's there for them. And so she says, you know what, girls, why don't you just stay in Moab? Orpah says, yes, I'm going to do that. But Ruth kind of has a conversion experience. And she chooses to walk away from everything she knows. She chooses to walk away from her religion, her family, her friends, her culture, everything. In fact, this is not a political statement, but we do have a lot of immigrants in our country, right? Like, that is how our country was founded upon, where every single one, almost every single one of them came to our country looking for a better life, correct? Yes. But in this particular case, Ruth actually decides to go to Bethlehem knowing that her life is going to get worse. Knowing that it's going to get worse. Because not only did they have nothing, but the Israelites were very prejudiced against the people of Moab. And yet she does it anyway. Look at what it says in Ruth chapter 1, verse 16. Look what it says. It says, but Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. And see, I think in this story, there are some lessons. There's 4 of them that I've written down in there. There's lessons that we can learn about flipping the script when we're in the middle of challenges. And so here's the very first one I want you to write down. Number 1 is opening yourself up to what God might want to do. Opening yourself up to what God might want to do. Here's the reality, is that Ruth's heart was completely open at some point in time. That it wasn't through a sermon, it wasn't through like a Tony Robbins seminar, it wasn't through a shame or guilt or anything like that. But it was opened up. It was opened up at some point where it wasn't even the hope of a better life, but it was simply God working on her heart, where she decided, okay, Lord, you can have your way. You can have your way. Here's what I want us to do. Every single one of us in here right now. Can you just think with me real quick? Do you have a person in your life? And most of the time we do. But do you have a person in your life who you know and you've been working on helping them change year after year, moment after whatever it may be, that you just believe, man, these people are never going to change, right? Anybody have that type of person that you can think about? I have that person, right? Here's the challenge. Here it is. That if you have the person, if you can think about someone that is never going to change, here's the reality. Your God is too small. That if there is a person, and I just told you, I have that same person inside that I can think of right now, then our God is too small. Because here's what I know. Ruth changes her entire life. Remember, she was a Moabite. She was a pagan. She worshiped idols. Child sacrifices, all of this stuff. And yet this transformation happens in a way that could only be God. By the way, it was in the middle of difficulty. It was in the middle of her husband dying, her being barren, right? It was in the middle of all of that she was able to open up to God. And then it goes on, though. It goes on. Here's what it says in Ruth chapter 1, verse 19. Here's what it says. It says, when they arrived, talking about Naomi and Ruth, when they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women exclaimed, can this be Naomi? Here's the translation in this. Here it is. They're coming back home and all that. And they're like, oh, girl, I love you. It is so good to see you. But girl, you look terrible. That's literally what she's saying. She's, honey, you know what? It's great to see you, but man, something happened to you. Honey, you need to go get a spa. You need to go take care of yourself. You need to get your nails did, right? Anybody ladies, you like getting your nails done? And it's okay. Anybody like getting your nails done? Yeah, it's great. It's fantastic. Here's the thing, though. I'm just going to let you know, if you're single in this house, here's what I've never heard before. I've never heard one dude go to another dude and be like, hey, did you check out the nails on that girl? Like, I ain't never heard that, right? Like, ever. But hey, you can have it. It's great, right? But that's what they're saying. It's like, honey, it's good to see you, but man. But then look, it goes on. It says this. It says, don't call me, Naomi's saying, don't call me Naomi, because in Hebrew, Naomi actually means pleasant or delightful. She told him, call me Mara, which in the Hebrew means bitter. Because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. And my question is, have you ever been there? Have you ever been in the middle? Have you ever been when you're in the middle of a difficulty and you throw your hands up and you say, why, God, am I going in this? Have you ever been there? I think if we're being honest, every single one of us has. At some point, at some level, every single one of us has. I got a text just this last Wednesday. I actually wasn't supposed to speak this weekend. Yesterday was my birthday. It was good. You know, I'm getting way too old. A lot of you said happy birthday to me. Thank you for doing that. You are definitely going to heaven. The rest of you, I don't know. But anyway, I got a text on Wednesday from a very good friend of mine. A very good friend of mine. His name, Pastor Nick. He speaks here. Y'all know Pastor Nick. He speaks here. He's great. But he was actually supposed to speak this weekend. But when we were booking it, he said, Rusty, put me in, but at the same time, make sure that you have maybe pencil somebody else in or whatever, because my baby, if you all remember, he was supposed to have his second child. They were supposed to have it, was going to be soon to be born. Well, I got a text on Wednesday that said, hey, bro, last night my wife was having contractions, and so we went into the hospital, and when we got there, the baby had no heartbeat. When I got that text, I literally dropped. I couldn't, my legs literally wouldn't support me. I dropped. Because my good friend, who, by the way, had 2 miscarriages right before this, takes this one basically to term, and there's no heartbeat. Well, the next day, I got another text that said, hey, she just gave birth to a 5-pound, 17 3/4-inch baby, stillborn. And my heart broke. It breaks for them. They're in the middle of all of this pain, and it's unbearable. And he's like, Rusty, I don't even know what to think right now. I don't know what to do. Like all of this. And again, the question is, have you been there where there's these hurts? Where there's these questions of why, where there's these self-doubts, and you think, man, what am I supposed to do? And here's the reality. Naomi in this story is feeling the exact same way. Her sons are dead. Her husband is dead. Her future's gone. And in the middle of it, her mind is spinning. And there's nothing you can say, and there's no words, there's no cliches, there's no magic words for any of it. None of it. But here's what I want you to notice. That Naomi, as she's sitting there and she's talking to her friends about all the difficulty and struggle that's in her life. And folks, that's not bad. That's a good thing. You need to talk about those things. But here's what she's doing. She's completely negating the fact that Ruth is standing right there. And that doesn't take away the pain. But moments before this, Ruth just gave her life to her. and said, where you go, I will go. Where you die, I will die. Your God will be my God. I am here for you. And it's the second learning that I wanted you to write down, that we need to guard against becoming blind to God's blessings. Folks, when you're in the middle of it, we got to guard against that. When we're going through it, we got to understand that God is still at work. When things aren't going our way, when our finances aren't right, our marriage isn't right, our relationship's not right, our kids are going, whatever it may be. Folks, the truth is that sometimes we can be blind to the blessings of God. Because there's been so many times that I've been so enamored with my own loss or my own brokenness or my own bitterness or whatever that I can miss, again, the blessing of God in my life. And that doesn't mean I'm trying to minimize the pain that's going on. That's not what I'm saying at all. But God was using Ruth to support Naomi. Here's the problem, though. Naomi had become so accustomed to having Ruth around that she forgot how much of a blessing she was. That familiarity with Ruth blinded her to God's hand. And there's so many times that every single one of us has done it. Where sometimes, we get blinded to the fact, if you're married in this house, we get blinded to the fact that our spouse is a blessing to us. That our family is a blessing to us, that our church is a blessing to us, that God has put into our life, and gratitude should be there for all of those things. Well, here's where this really affects me, if I'm being completely honest. It's when I look at my kids. Any parents in the house? Yes. Like when I look at my babies, I'm like, I don't know if I always look at them as a blessing of the Lord. Right? Like especially during COVID, because they're always like right here, like they don't go anywhere and they're just right there. And maybe it's when they do dumb stuff. Like when they wreck your car. Anybody had their car wrecked by their kid? Yep, look at this. Yep, hands. Anybody had their kid like wake them up at 2 a.m. and they're doing whatever? Like you're like, what do you want? I'm sleeping. I just want to play. Whatever. Right? Or they come up to you when they're toddlers like, Daddy, wipe me. I don't want to wipe you. Whatever. And I look at it, I'm like, man, I forget, And here, I'm convinced that the only people that really believe that our children are always a blessing are grandparents. Any grandparents in the room? Yeah. I love you guys. And you always think that these babies are amazing. They're always awesome. You know why? Because you can give them back. Yeah. I can't wait to be you, being truthful. But see, the same was going on with Naomi here, where I think here's the deal. I think sometimes I can forget that God uses my children to help me become a better daddy. God uses my children to help me become a better husband. He uses my children to help me become a better disciple of Jesus. And again, the same thing was true for Naomi, where God gave her a blessing, but she just couldn't see it. Now, I've got only a few minutes left, and so I need to fast forward because Ruth is 4 chapters long, and we'd be here all day. And y'all don't want that. So here we go, right? At this point, though, Ruth and Naomi are still, they're desperate. They still have no money. They're desperate for food. And so here's what they start doing. They start gleaning from a local farm. And so basically it was like the welfare system of the day where God had kind of set it up where the harvesters could glean kind of the middle of the farm, but they always left margin on the sides so that others could come and glean from that so they could have food for them. But look what happens here, okay? This is Ruth chapter 2, verse 3. It says, so she, Ruth, right, went out, entered a field, and began to glean behind the harvesters. As it turned out, she was working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. Underlying clan of Elimelech. Here's why, because it was huge. Because what we find out is that Boaz is actually related to Elimelech. She was related to Naomi's deceased husband. And so what's going on here is that you have this owner of this field, right? He's the wealthy older guy that is now meeting the single younger woman. Can you now see the Hallmark movie kind of happening, right? Yes, here we go. It goes on from there because what happens is the mother-in-law starts getting all involved about how can we get them together. Ruth chapter 3, verse 3, look what it says. She's talking to Ruth. She's coaching her. She says, wash, put on perfume, and get dressed in your best clothes. Translation, here it is. Honey, Boaz only sees you when you're sweaty. take a shower, right? Shave, wash your hair, put on some Chanel, whatever. Can't you hear the jingle? FarmersOnly.com, right? Like, that's what's happening right now. You can just see the whole thing. And she doesn't even stop there like Naomi. She keeps on coaching her. She does. In fact, look at this. Man, you're going to want to put this verse on your refrigerator. It's Ruth chapter 3, verse 7. You read it. I'm going to paraphrase it for you. She says, honey, it's all about timing. Literally, that's what she says. She says, you let him have fun. You let him hang out with his boys. You let him go ahead and have chicken wings and watch it on the big screen. Man, Bible actually says you can have a big screen. You're welcome for that. But that's literally what it says. You're going to want to put that on your fridge, right? But she says here, let him enjoy his own whole evening and then make your move. She says, here's the move. Cuddle up next to his feet. Sounds weird, but apparently in that culture, that's what it was, okay? Don't recommend that today. But that's what he does. So Boaz wakes up and Ruth is right there. And Ruth very courageously says, would you consider being a redeemer to my family? Basically, will you marry me and buy back the property that my, in-laws sold when they left Bethlehem? And he does. Actually, what he says was kind of funny. He's like, I'm an older guy and I don't really look as good as the other ones, Like, I look more Woody Allen than Denzel Washington was really what he says. But Ruth chapter 4, verse 13, here's what he says. It says, Boaz took Ruth and she became his wife. When he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive and she gave birth to a son. Folks, Ruth was married for over 10 years, had 0 kids. Wedding night happens, she conceives. Go Boaz, right? But there it is. Story complete. Everybody rides off to the in the sunset. God redeems, right? Ruth goes from idolater to worshiper of God. Naomi goes from bitter woman to happy grandma. In fact, look at Ruth chapter 4. It says, the woman said to Naomi, praise be to the Lord who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons has given him birth. Where here's the third lesson that I wanted you to write down. That sometimes it's a script that we need to flip is God often works through the mundane. He often works through the mundane. See, if we're being honest, I think a lot of us would love to see the miraculous. We would love to see the most amazing things. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But often it's the mundane, it's the obedience step after obedience step that creates the environment where God can do his most amazing work. Psalm chapter 121 verse 4 says, God never slumbers nor sleeps. Think about this. We just went through this entire story in say 20 minutes, right? The entire story. Ruth's actual story took 15 years. Folks, that's a long time to be in the middle. That's a lot of mundane. I had an opportunity to speak to a single mama, actually. And she came to me in full tears. And she said, Rusty, I just wanted to tell you how much this church and really God is working in my life. She actually said this. She said, I come in bent, and I come out walking straight, where God is helping me straighten out. Well, here's what I want you to realize about that conversation. It wasn't like an audible voice. It wasn't some big miraculous mountain move or whatever. What it was her opening herself up to God, intentionally coming to a place week after week where he could speak to her. He could sing over her life and tell her how valuable she was. And see, the truth is that I don't know where you're at, but if you're in the middle, sometimes it's all about perspective and perseverance. Where we take obedient steps small into where God can do what only God can do. And see, here's the final picture that we have of Naomi. She's holding her grandson. Here's what it says in Ruth chapter 4, 16 through 17. It says, Naomi took the child in her arms, cared for him. The woman there said, Naomi has a son, and they named him Obed, who was the father of Jesse, the father of King David, in the direct line of Jesus. And see, for some of you, here's a prophetic word for some of you in this room or watching online right now, that God is still active in your life, even if you don't feel it. Some of you in this room need to hear that God is still active in your life, even when you don't feel it. Romans chapter 8, verse 28, here's what it says. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. And then here's the final lesson that I want you to write down. Everybody needs a redeemer. Everybody. Folks, we can't redeem ourselves. And so you might be sitting there thinking, Rusty, here's the thing, man. I've been a Christian for 10 years. I've been a Christian for 30 years. Here's what I know about you. Even if you've been a Christian for that long, there's a piece of your life that still needs redeeming. And that God wants to do that. We talk about the next right step around here, that is what God calls us to, is that every one of us has a next right step. Dr. Martin Luther King, he said this. He said there's a tremendous difference between hope and optimism. He said optimism is belief in progress. Optimism is belief that circumstances are going to get better. Optimism focuses its eyes on what is seen and therefore is on pretty shaky ground. Hope, he says, is the conviction that there's another reality, that there's another kingdom, that a kingdom exists and has existed throughout all of eternity and is doing very well right now, that it will prevail. And see, here's the thing for every one of us, that we can be optimistic when we're in the middle of it, or, which is based, again, on what Dr. King said, on what we can see, or we can have hope in the middle of it that our Redeemer lives, that he will prevail, that he can do something that I can't do. At the end of the text message that I got on Wednesday, Nick said this about his son, who he named there in the text, and he said, Canaan Nicholas Wallstead. He said, Rusty, I can't begin to fathom the pain of this loss that it's going to be for me. But we choose to hope in the victory that Jesus has already won. Even over this, Canaan is beholding the face of his father in heaven. In the middle of the most difficult tragedy that my friend has ever been in his entire life, I have hope in Jesus. That's what he said. Folks, God can redeem in the greatest pains of our life. Where every single one of us can have a redemption story. The question, though, is whether we're willing to flip the script and let him write the pages of that story. Because when we write it, it never ends as well. Ultimately, the reality is this, and what I've been trying to express for the last 3 weeks, that your God, if you are a follower of Jesus, is not uninvolved, he is not uninterested, and he is not absent from your life, that he is active in your life. The question is whether or not we have the perspective to see it. Whether we will notice and have gratitude in the middle of it, because we can believe and hope that God is standing right there. Father God, I thank you. I thank you, Lord, that you stand with us, that you walk with us, that you hold us up. That, Lord, you say that we don't have to do this by ourselves, but you're right there. And so, God, I pray for every single person in this room. I pray for everyone watching online. God, I don't know the difficulty that they are in or whatever, but Lord, I pray that you will be real to them right now. Holy Spirit, fall. That you would speak truth and help us to flip that script. Help us to understand that you do work in the mundane. Help us to see how you're already blessing us in the middle of it. Help us to see how you walk with us.